Hello everyone, my name is Aakanksh Gurnani, and welcome to my YouTube channel Neuro Chat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism spectrum disorder, and more. On the channel, I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists, seeking their views and updates on their latest work, research, etc. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Before I introduce the interviewee, recipient of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World, today I would like to share my little story with you. I have been volunteering with neurominority individuals for a few years now. Being an avid book reader, I started reading about autism. I came across the book Autism and Education the Way I See It by Dr. Temple Grandin. I was mesmerized by the author's thoughts. Much later, when I thought about launching a video series, I could not have asked for a better thought leader and role model to launch my channel and video series. Sorry if I'm talking too much. This is like a big fan moment for me. Dr. Temple Grandin is a prominent American professor of animal science at Colorado State University, a renowned author and an influential advocate for both autism and animal welfare. Dr. Grandin was diagnosed with autism at a very young age. Her unique perspective as an individual on the autism spectrum has significantly influenced her work in advocacy. Grandin is a vocal advocate for autism awareness and acceptance. She has written several books and delivered numerous lectures on her experiences living with autism, providing valuable insights into the condition. Her life and work have been the subject of acclaimed HBO biographical film, Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin, a very, very warm welcome, and thank you very much for the time today. It means a lot, and as I said already, I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you very, very much.
You're a role model for me in terms of autism advocacy, and it's an honor to be able to interview you.
And it's good to be here tonight.
Okay, so I'll get started with my first question. Dr. Grandin, could you please talk about your early life and diagnosis of autism?
Well, I had no speech till age 4, and I was very lucky to get into a very good early speech therapy and education program. I cannot emphasize how important it is if you got little kids like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who are not talking. You need to do something about it now and get them into a really good early educational program. And I had that, and that's very, very important. I can give you some tips on how to work with young autistic kids. There were 3 main goals in my therapy: learning speech, learning how to wait and take turns at games. That's really important. And learning basic skills like, brushing your hair, getting dressed, basic skills. And you should be able to get this progress, and the kids should like going to therapy.
So today, obviously, autism can be diagnosed in toddlers. And when parents find out that their child has autism, what do you advise these parents to start with to go on to those steps you just mentioned?
Well, I think joining a local support group would be a really good idea. They can talk to other parents. I've got that Autism and Education. That's a good book to start with. It's not very long, so you're not getting inundated with too much information. But you need to get the child into a good program. Now, when I was 3, I looked very severe. You can have a child that actually looks really severe at a very young age, and some of those, if you work with them, will learn how to talk. I was one of those. And then there'll be others that don't learn to talk, but some of them can learn how to type independently on something like an iPad. And typing independently is something we need to be encouraging.
And you have always emphasized on early intervention and early learnings in autistic kids. The world knows your story on how this has helped you tremendously. There are 2 contrary ideologies between regular schools and special needs schools. What are your views on the education system?
Well, I want to see autistic kids mainstreamed into a regular school as much as possible. I went into a special school until I was 5, and then at 5, I went into a normal kindergarten class in a small school. And then there's others where, a special school might be the best choice. But as much as reasonably possible, I like to see the kids mainstreamed into a regular school.
And in this very cool book you've written, Unwritten Rules,
Yeah.
you mentioned not all kids like to learn. Some dislike to learn social skills. You also talked about how you learned to control your emotions, as sometimes you got into trouble at school or later on as well.
Well, I got
However,
in a lot of trouble for fighting as a teenager, and I got bullied in high school. High school was the worst part of my life, absolute worst part of my life. And the only places I was not bullied was friends who shared interests. My science teacher had the model rocket club. The bullies were not there. Also, I had lots of friends riding horses, friends who shared interests. That's a really important concept. I mean, today it might be robotics class, a chess club, a Star Wars club, someplace where there's friends with similar special interests.
yeah, that's something I feel like I've seen can be very helpful. Like even for me, being with the people who share my interests makes my days a lot better.
Yeah.
Um,
What are some of your interests?
well, I really like reading. Um, so I started with Harry Potter and similar fantasy books, and I've been reading more nonfiction lately, but that's something that's always stayed with me.
Well, I started with The Wizard of Oz.
Mhm.
That's my generation's Harry Potter book.
And one question I had about like understanding of controlling emotions. Um, so like one rule doesn't apply to everybody for emotions or learning capabilities. So like what guidance would you have to caregivers, parents, friends on um like helping in emotional regulation?
Well, one of the problems for a lot of individuals on the spectrum is sensory overload. Like we'd go on this ferry boat and it had a very loud horn that it blew when they went into the harbor. And I remember it hurt my ears like a dentist drill, and I just threw myself down on the deck and started screaming. Now, one of the ways to help children deal with loud noises is if the child can control a noisy thing. Let's just take a vacuum cleaner or a hair dryer. If the child can turn that on and off and control it, it's often much better tolerated. They can control the noisy thing, such as beeping a car horn, for example.
Um, so I also watched that movie on your about your life on HBO,
Yeah,
and I was really amazed about how you could visualize problems and see their solutions. Um, and we know about like how many kids have gifts or talents on the spectrum, like if it's, really good at composing music,
yeah.
drawings, or with math. So is that something that you developed, or is that like, something that you could just do?
Well, no, that's the way I think. My memories are sort of like pictures stored on a phone. And I take pictures in my mind of things I'm interested in, and then I can search through my memory and click on those pictures, and then they'll move a little bit, just like the live versions on a phone. That's how my memory is. And I was shocked to find out that other people thought in words. I didn't know other people thought in words until I was my late 30s. That's when I found that out.
So another book of yours, Emergence, you talked about loneliness, affection, and fear of human contact. Could you expand on that?
Well, when I was a little kid, I couldn't tolerate being touched. It was like just too much of an overwhelming tidal wave of stimulation. And one of the ways I helped desensitize that was using my squeezing machine. That also, the deep pressure helped calm me down, but it also, I could control the squeezing machine. And then when you can control something, then you can get to where you can tolerate it.
I wanted to talk about something very interesting, um, in regards to your cattle field designs. Um,
Okay.
that the best-selling book about you, How the Girl Who Loved Cows
Yeah.
embraced autism and changed the world. So how did you notice this problem, and how did you find the solution to it?
Well, when I first started looking at animal behavior and looking at cattle behavior, since I'm a visual thinker, it was obvious to me to look at what the cattle were looking at. That was obvious to me. Now, if you think in words, then maybe you might not think it's important to look at what cattle were looking at. And some of the things that they'd be afraid of in the chutes would be a chain hanging down, coat on the fence, a little piece of paper blowing around, a shadow, which might change with the time of day. That would make the cattle stop and refuse to go through the chute. And when I first started looking at this, nobody had really looked at this before.
And what did you find once you started like noticing it?
Well, I noticed that if you remove the distractions, like you take the coat off the fence, maybe I can't do anything about the shadow, but I can tie up the chain that's hanging down, get rid of the paper cup on the floor. Those things I can move, and I found that improved the movement of the cattle. Move the vehicles that are parked all around the facility, get them out of the way so they don't see them. That also helped.
Another book of yours, The Loving Push.
Yeah.
You talked about supporting spectrum children to reach their potential.
Well, I'm seeing too many kids where they're not learning basic skills like shopping, ordering food in restaurants, and we've got to get all the screen time under control. I never would suggest banning it, no, but it needs to be limited. Spending 10 hours a day on screens, then you're not learning any other things. And I sometimes see some parents get too overprotective, and their 16-year-old who might be doing well in school has never gone in a store and bought something by themselves.
So do you have any like real life examples of scenarios where I guess kids who had a loving push were able to reach their potential other than yourself,
Yes.
of course?
No. Oh, yes, I have. I've had parents come up to me and says, well, I gave my kid loving push and he's got a job in a house now. These are, and what you don't force them into something they can't handle, like certain kinds of jobs I want to avoid. Chaos at the McDonald's takeout window, I want to avoid that. Store that's just super busy during the holidays, I want to avoid that. The other accommodation that can really help is giving directions when there's directions for some task that involves a sequence, like closing out a cash register. Give it to them in a pilot's checklist format. Step 1, step 2, step 3, bullet points of the steps for doing something like closing out the cash register. Because I have a hard time remembering that if somebody just yaks it to me.
So also,
the other thing that was done with me is give me some choices. I was afraid to go out to my aunt's ranch when I was 15 years old. And mother gave me a choice. You can go out and stay for a week. And if you don't like it, come back home, or you can decide to stay all summer. Not going wasn't an option. That was not an option. Simply not an option.
Which one did you pick, if you don't mind me asking?
I went out there, loved it, and stayed all summer. And that's what
Okay.
happens with a lot of these kids. I had a mom say, well, my kid was afraid to go to sleepaway camp. And I gave him that option, and he got out there and loved it and stayed there all summer. The same sort of thing. So you always want to give some choice, but just not going wasn't the choice. The length of time that I was going to go, I had a choice.
Yeah, so sometimes pushing people out of their comfort zone can really make them find something
Well, you
they
need to
love.
push them out of their comfort zone, but you don't do what I call throwing them in the deep end of the pool.
Okay.
You don't do that. Well, like putting them in a super busy store during the holidays. That I'd avoid. Too much multitasking, too much rapid multitasking. Those kinds of jobs often don't go well.
And this is the last one of your books that I have, but in this book, Navigating Autism, you talked
Okay.
about the 9 strength-based mindsets. Could you talk a
main-
little bit more about those mindsets?
Well, the main purpose of this book was to get parents out of the autism mindset that the kid's not able to do anything. And I'm just appalled at the number of teenagers that are fully verbal. They have never gone shopping by themselves. They don't have a bank account. They're just not learning any of these basic skills.
And in that, you also talked about how people should know their medical conditions and to prepare their kids for the real world, especially financial transactions. You mentioned bank statements too. So
Well, I learned how to save money when I was a little kid. I got 50 cents a week for allowance when I was a little kid. That could buy a lot in the 50s, equal to about $5 today. And I could buy 5 comics with that. But if I wanted the 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I was learning that at a very young age.
okay, and that's something that you feel there's a lack of right now?
Yeah, there's not enough of teaching life skills. Academics is important, but learning life skills is equally important.
And this is more a question about the future oriented, but so the world needs like all kinds of minds to work together. Um, could you please share your thoughts on how this will become more important in the future?
I'd like to discuss that in my book on visual thinking. And I am an extreme visual thinker, or an object visualizer, where everything I think about is a picture. So my kind of mind is very good at mechanical devices, art, working with animals, and photography, and absolutely terrible at higher math. And then the other kind of mind is a mathematical mind, and they think in patterns. These are the mathematics, music and math. And then you've got some people that are strictly verbal thinkers. And there's some autistic people that are verbal thinkers. And they often love history, love facts, and the kinds of jobs that they can be very good at is specialized retail, selling cars, selling phones, selling business insurance, where they have knowledge of all the different products and can help you buy the right car, the right business insurance. Not necessarily the most expensive, the right thing.
And also you have done a lot of advocating. And today's etiquette and education for autistic kids is very different from the 1950s. Um, could you talk about how it's changed?
Well, one thing that was actually an advantage in the 1950s is social skills were just taught. Like my mother would cue me, you forgot to say please, or you forgot to say thank you. Another thing that was done in the 50s that taught social skills is when kids were 8 years old, when the parents had a party, you had to dress up in your good clothes and you had to greet the guests, shake hands with them, and talk to them. And it's a very simple thing to do. Doesn't cost anything, and it teaches social skills. Also, I sold quite a bit of candy for charity, and that taught me how to talk to people.
And what about the other way? What things do you think have improved since the 1950s?
Well, things definitely improved is that the more severe cases of autism just got institutionalized, because when I was 3, I looked very, very severe. And I was the kind of kid they normally would have put in an institution. But the first doctor I went to was a neurologist, and she had a colleague that ran a little speech therapy school out of their house. Very good program, just as good as any program today. And going to that speech therapy school was really important. And I was enrolled in that at age 2.5.
So, do you have any upcoming books or new content that I and everybody else should be looking
Well, I've
forward
been
to?
working on updating my livestock handling and transport book. I've been working on that. We're just finishing that up, and it's update 6th edition of my livestock handling and transport book.
This is my final question. Do you have any final thoughts, recommendations for parents, autistic individuals out there, and the rest of the audience?
Well, we need to be looking at what the individual can do. And there's we've got to get them off the screens, because the ones that are spending 10 hours a day on the screens, they're not getting out and getting jobs. And one of the ways to get them off the screens is car mechanics. It's actually been very successful. It tends to be the visual thinkers that get addicted to screens. And there's been some real successes with slowly introducing young adults to fixing cars, and they discover motors are more interesting than video games. And there's some really good programs on that. Now, the skilled trades are not for everybody, but for my kind of mind, there's lots of good jobs fixing cars, also fixing elevators. As I travel around, I'm seeing more and more broken elevators, because the people that were good at fixing them have retired. And elevators are not going to go away. They're going to be mechanical devices, I mean, just about forever, I think. And they're going to need fixing. And for the visual thinkers like me, that'd be a very good job that's not going to get replaced with artificial intelligence. Elevators are going to work with cables and pulleys or hydraulics for a good long time until we get anti-grav. And I don't see that anytime soon.
That's some very sci-fi.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Elevators are going to be mechanical devices for the foreseeable future, and AI is not going to be fixing that.
Dr. Grandin, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, and congratulations on all your amazing success. It's
Okay,
been
good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute delight to speak with you as well. I will definitely be reading that book you showed me earlier, um, about visual thinking, and I'm looking forward to reading more of your books as they come.
All right, well, thank you very, very much, and it's been really good talking to you.